Good morning, Dolphins fans. Welcome to another episode of On the FinSide with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, all of our social media outlets, as well as the finfanatic.com website and the Fansided network. And if you don't get a chance to join us live here, be sure to also check it out on YouTube and the iTunes as an iTunes download as well. So the Dolphins go to Las Vegas to Allegiant Stadium here at 4 Eastern time, 3 Central this weekend, this Sunday, to play the Las Vegas Raiders. And right now they're 4-point underdogs, and not not a lot of injuries on the Dolphins side except for Tua, which obviously it looks like he's going to be out a couple of weeks, could be anywhere from, Ian Rappaport said that there's a possibility he could come back next week. The Dolphins didn't put him on short-term IR, which would have kept him out for 3 weeks. And so we should see him back anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks, probably closer to 3 weeks. But Paul, taking a look here, obviously Dolphins Twitter rightfully has been pretty angry this week. We were pretty upset Sunday night when the Dolphins lost 35-0 to the Bills. So I'll throw it to you. Has any of the steam died down on your end?
Some of the steam, maybe. It's still disappointing. And then we talked a lot about the offensive line this week, and I know we're going to get into that a little bit here shortly. But some of the changes that they're making on the offensive line don't fully make sense. It's a very interesting thing, like the fact that Austin Jackson and Jesse Davis are going to be the bookend tackles yet again. It will be interesting to see, because it sounded like Flores acknowledged same thing that we said last week, which is it wasn't just an issue with the offensive line blocking. It was an issue with the blocking scheme in a lot of cases. Now, if they haven't adjusted to players coming off the edge, shame on the Raiders DC for not utilizing the exact same type of blitz until they show that they can pick it up.
I think it's a talent issue at the tackle spots. It's a communication issue. It's a picking up the blitz issue. And this is part of what comes with having such a young offensive line. And it's why it's a decision I didn't really agree with to begin with. I don't think you should have, 4 of your 5 offensive linemen who are second or rookie or first, second, or third year players who don't quite get it yet. Offensive line is a tough position to learn when you're an NFL player. And in addition, and then your other guy who's actually a veteran, Jesse Davis, sucks. So it's not a good situation there. So
I want to jump in on that before we move on. Jesse Davis sucks at tackle. Let's be clear, because if you move him back,
and he's okay at guard at
right,
best.
And okay is okay. Like it's not everybody on the O line has to be a world beater, like we talked about. And Kat, I'm gonna ask you this real quick as well, because I know you just asked it in chat. Ideally, it seems pretty easy to make this a functional line at this point. You put Liam Eichenberg in at left tackle. You pull Austin Jackson and let him battle it out with Solomon Kinley for left guard. You take Jesse Davis and Robert Hunt and just flip them. Hunt's a better tackle. Davis is a better guard. And
Yeah.
you have a better offensive line at that point. Maybe not great, but I'd say you'd be able to possibly have a top 15 offensive line with that 5.
I wouldn't go as far as top 15, but I
Potentially.
agree with you. I agree with you with what you're saying. And it seems like that's what Dolphins fans want to see. Liam Eichenberg at left tackle, in the Patriots game, at the very least looked the part. And, I don't, and this is part of the problem for me with the Dolphins and how they look at the offensive line is Robert Hunt got on the field last year at right tackle. When he went to University of Louisiana, he was a right tackle. He played well. He was a first/second round pick projected. He gets on the field. He plays well last year. He gives up 3 sacks and I think 15 hurries and however many games he started. I know he didn't start the whole season there, but I think he started 12 games. That's good. So along the offensive line, if you show that you're a good player at a position, keep them at that position and hope they get better. Don't say, I really think Robert Hunt could be a Pro Bowl right guard. But
Or
so
Liam
let's
Eichenberg at left guard.
yeah. So let's Liam Eichenberg, Notre Dame, he didn't let up a sack in 2 years, but you know what? I think he could be a great left guard. Like it's the Dolphins thinking they're smarter than everybody. Just keep it simple.
I 100% agree with you. It's Eichenberg has shown he can play tackle, and in his first few games, he's really stood out in that regard, and he's still an ascending player. We're 2 games into his career, and why would you kick him inside when your tackles are struggling and he's getting the job done?
Right. And so ideally, what I would like for the Dolphins to see, and maybe they will do this, maybe they just don't want to make all those changes in 1 week, but that's where Liam Eichenberg starting at left guard over Solomon Kindley, which was the move they made this week. So they're keeping Austin Jackson and Jesse Davis at the tackle spots. That's where it really doesn't make sense.
No, because it's the same number of moves to put Eichenberg at left tackle as it is to put him at left guard.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I don't get it. I mean, if you had told me last year, this past offseason that your starting offensive tackles again uncontested would be Jesse Davis and Austin Jackson, I would say you're crazy and you shouldn't have drafted Tua in the first place if you were going to do that to him. Okay, Tua's injured, he's gone for a couple weeks. Guess what, Dolphins? You deserve it. Stupid. So anyway, let me put a. I'll let you have the last word there, and I'm going to try to put a positive spin on some of this too. I'm not going to have this be one long complaining fest by me, even though I know a lot of our viewers like to see that.
So, if the Dolphins really aren't sold on Kindley at left guard, here's the thing: you can still put Eichenberg at left tackle and let Austin Jackson, Manx, Kindley, Jesse Davis all fight it out for 2 guard spots while you still put Robert Hunt back at right tackle and protect what's going to be to his blind side when he's back.
And that's the thing about why the Dolphins needed to get a left tackle here, one of the last 2 off seasons, because if you did that, you could take all those resources and shove them inside. You can play Jesse Davis inside. You can see if you can resurrect Austin Jackson's career by playing him at guard, because, maybe he wouldn't work at guard either. And I think he probably wouldn't. But his biggest problem is that when he's alone on an island at left tackle, he whiffs repeatedly. Jesse Davis is doing the same thing at right tackle. Now this week against the Raiders, they're going up against Max Crosby. It's going to be Max Crosby against Jesse Davis at right tackle, and at left tackle, it's going to be Austin Jackson against Yannick Ngakoue. Both Crosby and Ngakoue are off to a great start to the season. Jackson and Davis are not. So something needs to change here. So Paul, but what I wanted to go back to is to try to look at this optimistically, just the team in general. I will say this: Jacoby Brissett's in a quarterback now. Tua is going to be out anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. I look at the next 4 games here. Okay, the Raiders game is winnable, and they head into week 3 as a much better team than the Dolphins, but it's winnable. They've also then got the Colts in Miami. They've got the Bucks, and they've got I'm drawing a blank. Then the Jaguars after that, right? So if they can come out of that 2-2, which I think is very possible, then we could start. Then we could say, okay, Tua's coming back. The Dolphins are 3-3. Maybe we can get this thing back on track a little bit.
Definitely, and I don't know if I'd even say the Raiders are a much better team, because taking a look at things, their running game is horrific. Richie Incognito is out, so they're going to be probably starting John Simpson. At right guard, they're starting Jermaine Illuminor, the guy that couldn't make this team on this offensive line that we've just been bashing. And their offensive line is suspect. And while those guys are off to a good start, I think the Raiders only have 5 sacks on the season so far. And if you really want to look at this optimistically, Jacoby Brissett has 1 start in his career against the Raiders. He threw for 265 yards. His completion percentage wasn't great, but 265 yards. Um, he threw for 3 touchdowns. He had an interception, and yeah, they lost the game, but that was the Colts defense playing horrifically, and Brissett did this in a game where they knew he was throwing, because I think the Colts let up 48 points or 44 points in that game. So I mean, Jacoby Brissett was chucking the ball around like crazy against the Raiders just a couple years ago, and really played well even though they lost.
That's what they're going to need to do here with Brissett, because the Dolphins are getting Will Fuller back this week, and they built this team to be able to dictate matchups from the receiver position. I don't. That's looking like a really bad move at this point, because when you build your team through the receiver position and ignore the offensive line, then the receivers can't get into their routes, and that's what we're seeing here in the first few weeks from the Dolphins. But one thing Brissett does that Tua can't at this point in his career is Brissett climbs the pocket and extends plays. The big thing that Brissett needs to do is, after he climbs the pocket and extends plays, he needs to find those one-on-one matchups and take some shots downfield. That's what the team was designed to do this year. And if they don't, and you're just dumping the ball off to Myles Gaskin instead of taking your shots deep, then I really don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and you can force the Raiders to be one-dimensional. You don't have to blitz like crazy against these guys, especially if Josh Jacobs doesn't play in this game.
And he's not going to play. He's
doubtful. I'm just saying, especially if he doesn't. Well, let's leave that smidgen of maybe. I mean, you look down there. Kenyon Drake will probably get the start, and he is off to a terrible start right now. He's averaging 1.5 yards per carry. It's Marcus Mariota is the only one with significant rush. Has almost as many yards on one carry as either Peyton Barber or Josh Jacobs do on 10 and 13 carries. Other than Josh Jacobs, there's no one averaging over 2.5 yards per carry for the Raiders. And
Mariota's an injured reserve too. Not that that really matters, but
right. But I mean, they'll be without Richie Incognito. They're starting Jermaine Illuminor. You should be able to push the middle of that pocket, which is going to force them, if they want to be effective running the ball, to go to the edge, and you should be able to collapse that pocket with Incognito out and Illuminor starting.
You're right. And the bigger, to me, the big mismatch is one you haven't even mentioned yet, is Emmanuel Ogbah against Alex Leatherwood, the Raiders' first-round pick, and he hasn't been. I mean, that was a eyebrow-raising pick to begin with, and he hasn't really looked all that good when he's been on the field. And last week he left the game with an oblique injury, so he will play, but he's going to be playing hurt. And if he can't make it the whole game, Brandon Parker would be the one to get put in there, and he's worse. So if Emmanuel Ogbah is looking for that big contract extension, this is the game that you've really got to take over. And whether or not he can make the most of that matchup there is going to determine whether or not the Dolphins blitz frequently too. Because if they're not getting to the quarterback, and the Dolphins weren't getting to the quarterback last year when the Raiders and Dolphins matched up. That's why Carr threw for 330 yards. You need to get back to your roots at that point and say, hey, we're going to send the house. We're going to play that cover zero defense. And if Henry Ruggs gets over the top, that's the risk we've got to take.
Yeah, and if you're able to push the pocket and push Derek Carr out of the pocket, if you're able to roast Alex Leatherwood, which, it's funny, it was an eyebrow-raising pick, and my favorite thing was when they talked to, oh God, I'm blanking on the name right now, the draft analyst. It's
Mike Mayock, their GM.
They talked to Mayock on NFL Network during the draft, and I think it was on day 3, and they asked him about Alex Leatherwood. And he basically said pretty much what we have. The reason that we had Leatherwood as a second, third, or fourth round pick, which was, oh, yeah, well, he's a solid plug-and-play guy. He's probably never going to be spectacular, but he's not going to be bad either. And it made it more eyebrow-raising that he realized the same things we do and was able to publicly say Like, oh no, he's really not that great. But the other thing I'll say too is I do want the Dolphins to blitz strategically with guys like Sam McGuavin or Egwavon and Jerome Baker, sending them periodically up the middle with their speed. Carr is not a fast quarterback, so if you send Baker or Egwavon up the middle and play with Simpson and Illuminor, you could really, really, really have some fun with it with a limited blitz package.
There's no excuse for the Dolphins not to get to the quarterback this week. And Colton Miller against Jalen Phillips will be another matchup. I've been patient with Phillips here, and I'll continue to be patient because I think the talent level is there. Um, he needs to start making a difference here as the season goes along. But yeah, I think you're right about the strategic blitzing there because if you don't know where it's coming from, it's harder to defend. And last year, the Dolphins just didn't blitz at all when it came to the Raiders. It was kind of weird late in the game. And then, Nelson Aguilar just absolutely went off. It was Byron Jones's worst game I've ever seen as a Dolphin. Aguilar had 5 catches for 155 yards. Obviously, he's not here anymore. The Dolphins faced him in week 1 where he had 72 yards and a touchdown. So something about Nelson Aguilar against the Dolphins. But the main guy, obviously, is Darren Waller, who went really heads up against Eric Rowe last year when the Raiders played the Dolphins. Waller had 5 catches for 112 yards. So, Paul, here's my question on that: is Darren Waller obviously one of the best tight ends in the league, one of the best all-around weapons so far over the last 2 years? Do you think the Dolphins should go heads up with Eric Rowe against Waller again, or do you think they should kind of divide that out a little bit?
I do think they should. I think Rowe has shown a very good ability to play tight ends. I know he got beat by Waller last year. They've been running the what was it, Rod Woodson with Waller bit on NFL Network periodically lately. And one of the plays they show a lot is when he really beat him over the top and Rowe almost made the play on the ball. And if you see at the bottom of the route, and Waller acknowledges this, Rowe got clipped by one of the Raiders receivers when he was trailing Waller, and he was about that far from the ball anyway on the play. So I mean, it's if he hadn't gotten clipped there, and clip's the wrong word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He really would have been in position at that point. So it's that takes away one of the big plays, and Waller's going to make plays. Let's not make any nonsense of it. Waller's going to make some plays in this game. It's very unlikely he gets shut out. He's that good. But I'd be willing to play Rowe on him, but you got to get a little cute with the coverages too, and periodically have a safety help over the top, or need him slide in and pick it up as well. If you can disguise the coverages and confuse them, you can force Derek Carr to make a bad play or make a bad pass because he's anticipating Rowe being on him.
Right. And I maintain that last year, Eric Rowe didn't even play all that bad against the Raiders. I mean, there were at least 2 long catches by Darren Waller that I even the broadcaster said, like, I don't see how you can defend that any better. So I agree with you. I think that overall you have Rowe try to go one-on-one against Waller. And look, if to me, you're challenging the Raiders at that point. You've got to make perfect throws again, and if you do that, hey, you deserve to win. But we feel like we're going to break up a few more of those passes this time, or they're not going to be delivered accurately. So right there with you on that. Henry Ruggs, kind of the 2020 version of Jalen Waddle in 2021. Not a surprise. They both went to the same school, Alabama. He was the deciding factor in the Raiders' win over the Steelers last week in general. I mean, that weapon of Carr being able to put the ball over the top to Henry Ruggs is something that's pretty scary. What I think too is that there's a difference between the Steelers and the Dolphins defense, that the Steelers kind of line up that 3-4 defense, kind of the same coverages, and say, we're just going to beat you. This is what we're going to do at just about every play. It's effective. But if you're Derek Carr, it's a little bit more predictable when you're looking at that. You're not changing the picture there in the secondary very often. And I think the Dolphins have a better ability to change from coverage to coverage, maybe confuse Derek Carr a little bit more. And if they blitz him as well, you're forcing him to make some quick decisions with a bum ankle.
Yeah, no, and that's another reason why I really think the interior of the Raiders line, as well as Alex Leatherwood, could potentially make this a long day for the Raiders. It's if you don't, I mean, Ruggs is fast, but if you don't have anybody that can block up front, it doesn't matter. We've seen that with the Dolphins in the past. I think like on that one, the sack that knocked two out of the game. What was it? 1.76 seconds before he got hit. And that's just not enough time for Ruggs to be able to roast Xavier Howard over the top or Byron Jones over the top. I mean, it just isn't. He's fast, but you've got to have that chance to actually beat the coverage.
And it's so frustrating that AJ Epineza is the player I wanted the Dolphins to pick late in the second round. And they took Raekwon Davis. It's turned out to be a good pick. I hope he comes back soon. It's frustrating to see the Bills get him, and then they line up and he's able to get to the quarterback in under 2 seconds, and he injures your starting quarterback. There's nothing worse than that. And AJ Epineza is turning into a better and better player. That sucks. But anyway, I'm getting too far off. But we have to remember too, Derek Carr has looked phenomenal in the first 2 weeks here. In the first 2 weeks, 817 yards passing in the first 2 games. He was on pace for 6,944 yards passing. I know it's 17-game season, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference there. But yeah, I mean, they've got 4 receivers with over 120 yards now. Waller, Ruggs, Brian Edwards, who is going to probably be matched up on the outside with either Jones or Xavier Howard, more of a big boundary type of receiver who's coming into his own. And the other big matchup we haven't talked about too is in the slot. On third downs, Hunter Renfrow is a machine on third down, kind of their Wes Welker there. And he's going to be matched up with Nick Needham. That's one of the bigger matchups here that I look at with the Raiders offense against the Dolphins defense.
Yeah, no, Renfrow is definitely going to be interesting, and hopefully Nick Needham's the one in the game. We saw last week, and we talked about it, Needham really didn't see the field much last week. So that could get interesting as far as that goes. But again, guys like McCourty were doing a good job of trying to jump those routes and getting in position, coming from the safety spot. So this has a lot of makings of a very, very interesting matchup. I mean, Drake, you've got to worry more as a receiver out of the backfield. Right now, his running has been abysmal. And then really, the Raiders feel like a pretender at this point. I know they've put up the passing yards, but part of that's the fact they haven't been able to run the ball. And they just feel like a team that's getting worse with key injuries. And
really getting worse. They just beat the Ravens and the Steelers
with key injuries. The Ravens and Steelers are not 2 teams that scare me this year. They're not.
Ravens just beat the Chiefs. I mean,
I know.
I don't understand. I mean, I think the Raiders have looked phenomenal the first 2 games. They've looked great on defense. They're getting to the quarterback. They're throwing the ball all over the yard. No, I think the Dolphins are in big trouble in this game. Big trouble.
I'm talking about with the injuries, the way that they're getting worse. That's where I'm talking about. That's why I said with key injuries. Derek Carr's ankle, the fact that they lost Richie Incognito before the season started for a few weeks, the fact that Josh Jacobs got hurt in week 1. It's they don't have a tremendous amount of depth in that regard. They basically lost most of their running game with Josh Jacobs. Derek Carr hurting his ankle like he did.
They could be due for Scummy said it in the chat. They could be due for a letdown. I'll give you that.
Mm-hmm.
And
they get better if they get healthy. Don't get me wrong, but they also still feel like a very thin roster after their starting lineup.
Okay. Okay. I can see that. And yeah, I mean, the Raiders always seem to come to Miami at the right time. If you look back at the last few years, I mean, remember in 2012, the Dolphins lost significantly in the first game. Then you had Reggie Bush running off for 170 yards the next game. They won that game. In 2014, Derek Carr's first year, the Dolphins were spiraling. There was talk about benching Tannehill before the game. The Dolphins wiped them out. They've won 7 of the last 8 games the Dolphins have against the Raiders. So let's hope that that continues here because they need it in the worst way. But looking at the predictions here, I don't feel great about this game either. One thing I will say about the Dolphins, though, a lot has been said over the last week by us, by a lot of people. I still think overall, with Brian Flores as head coach, I think they are a tough and they are an opportunistic team that played very badly last week. So they need to take advantage here again, and they need to get to 2-1. And if they do, we're talking about the season getting back on track. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to get back on track this week. I don't see the Dolphins being able just to come out against this Raiders defense, being able to protect Jacoby Brissett appropriately. So because of that, my score prediction is going to be the same one that I predicted with your boy Q here this past Tuesday, and that's going to be 23-14 Raiders.
I am going to say, and I am hopeful that Miami can take advantage of some of those things that we've already talked about. But I am going to predict for now that the Raiders come out and win this game 24-17. I do think that Miami could potentially take advantage of those injuries. If they can get to Derek Carr, this is still a one-dimensional team right now with Josh Jacobs out. And you could really flip this game there, especially if you're forcing Carr to make some bad throws with that ankle, given the secondary that Miami has. And Miami's secondary, combined with the Raiders' offensive line, there are some opportunities here for Miami to take advantage in this game. And they very well could. And if they do, it could be a very big snowball effect as the game moves forward.
Right. I mean, I see some matchups that do work in the Dolphins' favor, and the Raiders secondary, they added Casey Hayward here in the offseason. He's looked really good the first 2 weeks. They've got Trayvon Mullen on the other side, and Nate Hobbs, a 5th-round rookie, played 40-something snaps last week, looked really good too. I rewatched the Steelers-Raiders game a couple of times. So, but that's where the Dolphins have to win here. If they can't go into Las Vegas and win with Fuller, Waddle, and Parker, that's not looking good as far as what you spent your money on and your resources this offseason. So there still is hope in the chat. King Short said, come on, Cat, you got to have faith, brother. See, I don't have faith. I have hope. Okay. I hope that they win. I want them to win. I'm going to be there in my Dolphins gear, just as I always am, cheering my head off for them. And I hope they do win. I don't think that they will. It's up to them to prove me wrong and to prove to the Dolphins fan base that what we saw last week was not who they are and it was an aberration. One thing the Dolphins do have working for them is you look at the time frame from, when they played. If you go all the way back to 2019, the final game of the year against New England, since that game, the Dolphins have been 12-4 when they don't play the Bills. They've got to beat the Bills, but they tend to do well against the rest of the NFL. So we'll see if that continues here in this game with Tua out and Jacoby Brissett starting. That's going to do it here for our breakdown of the Raiders-Dolphins matchup. I'm Brian Cat NFL on Twitter. Paul is fanatic_pick. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, all of our social media outlets, the finfanatic.com website, and the FanSided Network. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is